if it's a Friday and you request at 10 a.m. on a Friday, you might not get your money back until Monday. This is basically the risk that the liquidity provider is taking. Enable leverage loopers to redeem in one block rather than having to wait 5 to 7 days. So now, what are the risks? Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Upshift, and I'm here to talk about Upshift Clear. Before I write anything on the board, I think it's important to talk about what an RWA is. As opposed to Bitcoin or Ethereum that are assets that only exist on the blockchain, an RWA, which stands for real world asset, is an asset that exists somewhere in the world. Equities, real estate, any other type of hard asset that we are bringing to the blockchain. In this case, let's take the example of a fund. You actually have to subscribe and request to redeem assets from a fund. So I'll cover what are the issues with that. So Upshift Clear is the title of the product. If you are a USCC holder, which is the receipt token of the fund, you hold the asset in your wallet and you want to get out of it, you call redeem on the Superstate application, and then a couple of things happen. One, the NAV gets computed. Two, a redemption is requested. The money goes to the custodian. And at the end of the process, you get either USD fiat via wire to your bank account or USDC in your blockchain wallet. Okay, now the problem is this process takes between 1 and 3 days. Why? Because for a traditional asset with the likes of Venmo or otherwise, you request on a Monday, you get your money back on a Tuesday, and then, so that's 1 day. And then if it's a Friday and you request at 10 a.m. on a Friday, you might not get your money back until Monday. This is a problem for a couple of reasons. There are two main use cases for why you want to put assets on the blockchain. The first one is borrowing against it, so using it as collateral on the lending market. And the second one is leverage looping it. To have an asset have a reasonable LTV on a lending market, like the Morpho and the Aves of the world, it's very important that you have instant liquidity to redeem. If this takes 2 days, then you have a problem for liquidators to be able to liquidate the asset. Similarly, if you're lever looping the asset, meaning you start with USDC, you deposit into USCC, you borrow dollars, deposit more USCC, and do this same process a couple of times, the redemption process takes in the order of 5 to 8 days, because you start by removing a little bit of collateral. That takes 1 to 3 days. You get your USDC back, you repay the debt, then you take the USDC back out, you request a redemption, you wait another 1 to 3 days, and the cycle goes on until you've unlooped your whole position. 5 to 8 days is a very, very long time in financial terms. Okay, so we've talked about the problem. Now, how does Upshift Clear solve the T+1 or T+3 problem? The goal is to enable instant redemptions for RWAs. So the structure is a vault. A vault is fundamentally a marketplace between liquidity providers and users who want to take the liquidity. So I'll describe at a high level the structure of the vault. You have a liquidity provider here on the left that provides dollars to the vault in the form of USDC. In exchange, they get a receipt token representing their position. In our case, it's called CLRWA. So the vault then receives, call it $1 million, and that money gets allocated to an idle buffer. In this instance, it is a Morpho Prime Vault. The goal here is that the liquidity, even before we touch any of the redemption process, the liquidity, as soon as it gets allocated, gets moved to Morpho, where it earns roughly 3.84% as of the last month. This means that as a liquidity provider, you are always earning something. There's never a point at which your money is sitting idle. So now we have a vault, which effectively is just earning very safe conservative yields. How does that impact or enable any type of instant redemptions? The vault is equipped here with a function called instant redeem. And it enables a holder, a USCC holder, like I had on the previous slide, call it a holder that has 1,000 USCC, to come and take part of that $1 million that's in here. So the USCC gets sent to the vault, the 1,000 USCC, and then on the way out, they immediately receive 1,000 USCC minus 5 bips, which is effectively 995 USDC equivalents. The 5 bips here is the fee that liquidity providers are earning for providing that immediate liquidity. So if you now are a liquidity provider, you're earning 3.84% when the money is doing nothing. And then every time that a redemption comes, you earn an extra 5 bips that stays in the vault. And so your return becomes 3.85 plus 5 bips every time it gets utilized. There's no straight formula for it because you don't know how frequently people are going to use it. But 5 bips times 365 is about 18%. So for all of the liquidity, you're earning 3.84% on idle funds and about 18% annualized on the used liquidity. Basically, where the math lands is that if your vault is 5% utilized at all times, your total here, when all is said and done, is about 4.41%. And so this enables us to design a product for liquidity providers that is extremely safe because it's only just doing what the Prime Vault is doing. And this is lending against very safe collateral. This is for liquidity providers that when they have idle funds would allocate there anyway. You get roughly 60 basis points on top from the instant redemptions. Now, we haven't finished the full flow. We processed the instant redemptions. So we used to have $1 million. $1,000 of that was redeemed. Now you have some USDC in the vault, and you need to go and redeem it. And so what the vault does is the vault is now integrated with the original source of the previous slide on Superstate's portal. And so the 1,000 USDC is taken to Superstate, where the normal redemption happens, which is, again, T+1 to 3. So the vault USDC holder comes in, immediately redeems 1,000 USDC. That USDC is then automatically sent by the vault, waits for 1 to 3 days, and at the end, you get the $1,000 back. So the vault is replenished, and the money goes back here immediately. So what we've achieved is we've gone from a process that was T+1 to T+3 to a process where the USDC holder gets instant liquidity. We're integrated with the Superstate redemption, and then the vault recycles the liquidity back to USDC where it gets redeposited in the idle buffer. So now, what are the risks? Let's just assume for the sake of the argument that 1 USCC is equal to 1 USDC. The first danger is that, so this is determined by an oracle. There's an oracle from Chainlink that is determining this price. And you need to make sure that, one, it's not producing bad data. Two, that it's up to date. And three, that there's no security threat. And so these are the three main risks. One, we have some guards around the fact that we will block a redemption if you're outside of plus or minus 5% of the true NAV. If the oracle is stale, so USCC is a fund, it makes some P&L every day. It starts at one-on-one. Let's say it makes 10% a year. And so at the end of the year, it's going to be 1.1. So you want to make sure that the holders are redeeming at the most recent price. The price is updated once every 24 hours, roughly, on weekdays. And so you want to make sure that if a redemption comes and the oracle is stale, this gets blocked. Finally, you have the risk that for whatever reason, there's a technical problem. We've seen many hacks in DeFi recently. And so if for whatever reason USCC receipt token gets hacked, there's any number of alerts that we're automatically monitoring that gets triggered. This whole system gets paused. So we'll call that emergency pause. That happens 24/7, automatically monitored. We use service providers like the hypernatives of the world to automatically pause the vault, which prevents anybody to redeem. What does this protect against? It protects against somebody minting or creating an artificial number of USCC, which would be fake money, and to use that to drain the vault, the $1 million in the vault. Once the emergency pause is triggered, it can only be turned off by a multi-sig, so we need a quorum of people to agree to unpause the vault and obviously take our time and run the relevant checks. These are all technical risks. The final risk is the risk that USCC drops in value. The first three risks were technical risks that are part of interacting with crypto in general. USCC dropping in value is really the only true risk that the liquidity provider is taking. They're getting paid 5 bips. And we've said that this is 1-to-1. So over a year, in theory, it should be a straight line up. But it is possible that on the short time frame, it might do like this. And so on day 30, it's slightly higher than day 31. And so users who redeems $1,000 worth of USCC, in theory, the two should net out, right? You redeem $1,000, you pay 5 bips to the vault, and then when the vault goes to redeem, it gets the $1,000 back. But what if this is, $990 because there's been a slight decrease in price? This is basically the risk that the liquidity provider is taking. The type of asset that you put in an instant redemption facility is important. And it's important not to commingle different types of risks because the liquidity provider needs to be comfortable with equivalent buckets of risk. In practice, this happens extremely rarely because USCC is actually very, very constantly up and to the right. Now, why should you trust us? A couple things. One, Upshift as a whole secures about $400 million in customer deposits. We've been around for 2 years. We have never been hacked. We have a very, very good OPSEC policy that is giving us, that's taken us a lot of pain to put together. 2, this vault was audited by Hacken multiple times for smart contracts and vulnerability. So to summarize, I think, I've mentioned a lot of technical things in this process, but at a very high level, what we're enabling with this facility is to turn a redemption process that takes 1 to 3 days and turning it into an instant process so that holders can deposit or redeem instantly. This enables users to borrow against their asset and giving more confidence to the lenders against USCC and enable leverage loopers that are looping USCC against USDC to redeem in one block rather than having to wait 5 to 7 days. Thank you very much.